The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Well, good morning. Today we've had a meditation Sunday and a sitting period together here in our Buddha Hall. And recently the monks of our order, the Order of Buddhist Contemplatives, have had an inspiring online discussion, which we're trying to do every 3 months or so. This one was a response to a question put forth, which was, what is the quintessence of the Dharma and how is it passed on? And so when I had to start preparing for this talk, it came up for me that it might be helpful. It brought to mind that we have a nice, wonderful little outline in the Order of Buddhist Contemplatives bylaws regarding our essential teachings and practices, which I really love, and it's always been a touchstone for me in my practice and what I try to go back to and check in with from time to time when offering teaching. And so I thought I might talk a bit about that today. Some of you may have heard all of this before. Of course, you all know the basic teachings and practices of our order, but perhaps not, you may not have heard this summary in this form. So I thought I might go over them, use the opportunity perhaps to offer some of my own reflections from my Dharma practice, and elucidate or illuminate the meaning and profundity of these teachings and practices from some quotes from our great masters in our lineage. I don't mean this to be a definitive statement on the quintessence of the Dharma by any means, nor the entire meaning of the essential teachings of the OBC or an academic study of its principles, of course. Just some reflections and hopefully inspiring quotes to help us in our practice and deepen our practice. So, under the article in our bylaws that is entitled Religious Teachings and Practices of the Order, Section 2 says, the tradition of the OBC is the transmission of the right law of Shakyamuni Buddha, which has been handed down by successive ancestors from master to disciple through direct communication from one heart to another. So right there it tells you it's meant to be, it's a very alive and dynamic thing, transmission. And Section 3 says, the religious teachings and practices of our order are broadly defined to include the following elements. First, the basic principles of Buddhism common to most all schools thereof. And secondly, the fundamental teachings and practices of the Manzan line of Serene Reflection Meditation, Soto Zen in Japanese. And Manzan is one of our Japanese ancestors. Of course, there are many branches of the Soto Zen tradition. As exemplified by the very Reverend Keido Chisan Koho Zenji, and as transmitted from him to Reverend Master Ho and Jiyu-Kennett in accordance with the direct Dharma transmission from the Buddhas and ancestors. So it's a live transmission, and it's our practice to keep that alive in our daily training. So these fundamental teachings and practices include primarily, number 1, the practice of serene reflection meditation, zazen or shikantaza. And secondly, the keeping of the 16 precepts. The principle that all beings are at heart Buddha, and gratitude. I always find that last one very interesting and sometimes forget about that. So just a nice little summary for any of you who may not have heard this before. And of course it encompasses an awful lot. I thought maybe we might look at each one of these in a little detail, and beginning with the practice of serene reflection meditation, zazen meaning sitting meditation or Shikantaza meaning just sitting or merely sitting. And most of you listening to this talk will have had some meditation instruction, know that it is foundational to our practice. You've probably heard Great Master Dogen's teachings in the Rules for Meditation, where he says just sitting with no deliberate thought is the important aspect of serene reflection meditation. And I underline deliberate there for myself. Personally, I would also add we let go of deliberate engagement with the senses, our feelings, sensations, etc., and so on, and just sit still in the midst of whatever is going on, bringing our attention back to where we are, not chasing after thoughts and things, not pushing them away. But I'd like to just offer some quotes to bring out some different aspects of this practice. In Great Master Dogen's chapter in the Shobogenzo called Sazengi, which means on the model for doing meditation, he says, set aside all involvements and give everything a rest. Do not think about what is good or what is bad. Do not exercise your discriminatory mind or weigh and judge your mind's remembrances, concepts, and reflections. Do not aim at becoming a Buddha, and drop off any concern with whether you are sitting or lying down. And the rest, meaning that this is not something just we do when we're just sitting. He goes on to say, with body and mind regulated in this manner, breathe out once, sit with the stillness of a mountain, and let what you are thinking about be based on not deliberately trying to think about any particular thing. How can what anyone is thinking about be based on not deliberately thinking about something? Simply by not making, in quotes, what I am thinking about, in quotes, end quote, the point of your meditation. This then is the technique for doing seated meditation. Seated meditation is a practice and not something for intellectual study. It is the Dharma gate to peace and joy. It is unstained training to realize the truth. And this passage about what I'm thinking about, don't make what I'm thinking about the point of your meditation, is from a dialogue from an old koan story Dogen is quoting. He quotes it in another chapter of the Shobogenzo called Zazenshin, which is talking about Wanshi's, Great Master Wanshi's kindly advice for doing seated meditation. Master Yakusan is responding to a monk who's asking him, he's observing the master sitting in meditation, then he asks the master what he was thinking about. The master replied, "It is a matter of what I am thinking about not being the point. There is someone involved in not," Dogen says now, "there's someone involved in not deliberately trying to think about something. And that someone is maintaining and supporting an I, capital I. Even though being ever so still is synonymous with that I, meditation is not merely an I thinking about something. It is the I, capital I, offering up its being as still and awesome as a mountain." I'm particularly fond of that passage. I'll repeat that again. It is the I offering up its being as still and awesome as a mountain. Even though its being ever so still is being ever so still, how can its being ever so still possibly think about being ever so still? This is Dogen, of course. As a consequence, being still as a mountain is beyond the considerations of Buddhas, beyond the considerations of Dharma, beyond the considerations of having awakened, and beyond the considerations of intellectual understanding. So I thought I'd offer that, just a little different perspective from Great Master Dogen there, which I hope is of some help. I'm going to do a little bit more quoting today. We recently have read in our community the Bodhisattva precepts, which we do once a year and read them in their entirety. And these are encompassed in the scripture of Brahma's net. And there's a little section in here that I'll share with you as well. Part of what's called the 10 decisions as part of the foundations of training. And this is Vairocana Buddha speaking to a multitude of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. He says, fifth, when a disciple of the Buddha, this is the fifth decision, turns his heart or her heart toward meditation, her tranquility and cessation of defiling passions will be beyond description. At that time, she, as a person beyond characterization, enters into the immaculacy of emptiness. Sentient beings whose minds are intent on the way do not see conditions as separate from the way. As a result, their practices are beyond description or measure, and the samadhi of their minds is measureless. Ordinary people, as well as saintly ones, are quite capable of entering samadhi. Their original nature is in accord with them all, since they are using their powers of meditation. So here we have no excuse and no inadequacies to be worried about. All beings are, we don't necessarily know when we're entering samadhi, but we do, by the very nature of sitting in shikantaza. I'd just add a little footnote here from Reverend Master Jiyu, which I find extremely helpful. She defines the term emptiness, which is so essential to our meditation practice. She says, when emptiness, in quotes, or the immaculacy of emptiness occurs, it should be recognized as that state of being in the unborn, undying, uncreated, unchanging. Emptiness refers to that which is usually thought of as emptiness, which can lead to grave misunderstandings of emptiness, such as nihilism, together with its opposite. Erroneous methods of meditation requiring a person to empty his or her mind, etc. So there's something to be careful about. And here she says, emptiness, as with mind, capital M, is unceasing spirituality. That really struck me when I read it recently. We reread this scripture. Emptiness, as with mind, capital M, is unceasing spirituality. That is a helpful reflection for what happens with our meditation. Reverend Master Jiyu's teacher, Koho Zenji, also has some very helpful things to say. He says here, the practice of serene reflection meditation is a manifestation of faith in the Buddha nature. Zazen, which teaches the identity between enlightenment and training, becomes the preliminary step for the realization of enlightenment. Buddhism in general teaches that there is a gradual development toward enlightenment, which is made possible because of the Buddha nature. However, serene reflection meditation is in perfect harmony with original enlightenment itself, which is the Buddha nature. Yet simultaneously it transforms itself into this enlightenment and causes it to materialize fully. Enlightenment and serene reflection meditation are identical. The teaching that original enlightenment is found in all beings is the essence of Zen. So there you have it. We often worry that we're nothing's happening with our meditation. And I think that teaching helps immeasurably with that, just to let go of worry. He's also known, Koho Zenji, to have said maybe to Reverend Master. For some reason I have written down this quote and have it as one of my bookmarks. Koho Zenji says, "Life is only a frightening thing without meditation. If we really live it, we must meditate." And then he adds, "If you meditate, you run the risk of being grabbed by the cosmic Buddha. So don't be surprised if it works." Well, I went into a little more detail on the meditation since we've had the Meditation Sunday. The other essential teaching that I mentioned in our little outline of OBC essential practices is, of course, the keeping of the 16 precepts. And I'm not going to go into all of those right now, but most of you will know that these are the 3 treasures precepts: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha refuge, the 3 pure precepts, and the 10 great precepts. When I was contemplating this, I remembered the saying. Again, I have it on a little poster in my room. I've had it for many years, which I'm very fond of. And this is a saying from Great Master Manzan Dohaku, one of the significant ancestors in our Japanese lineage. He says, "If someone wishes to learn the truth, he, she, or they must become an iron man, or an iron person or being. If someone wishes to learn the truth, they must become an iron person." I've always found that very helpful at times when I needed to really sit still. And for me, this figures into practice of the precepts. I think the practice of the precepts helps us to find that solid, grounded place within ourselves and cultivate it, develop it. Because Buddhist practice involves taking responsibility for our own lives, our karma, and the direction we're going into. And the best guidance for this and for cleaning up our negative karmic inclinations is to follow the precepts. It's what gives our lives a noble purpose and the ability to live in harmony with who we truly are at heart, as well as living a life that is one of the greatest possible benefit to others. The iron person is one who is willing to bear that which is difficult to bear, accept the karma of our past mistakes and training, the things that we don't like, receiving the things that we don't like, not getting the things that we like, etc. The iron person is willing to sit upright in the presence of the Buddha, within the heart of joy and sorrow, and sometimes, or maybe often, go against the rushing current of worldliness, of worldly mind, which can succinctly perhaps be defined as the push to constantly create opposites in the mind, to produce clouds in a clear sky. Reverend Master Jiyu often mentioned to us that Buddhism was a religion for spiritual adults, and certainly following the precepts requires that, becoming a spiritual adult. And she cautioned about not watering the practice down to a sort of feel-good practice that can unfortunately just shore up a false sense of self. There seems to be some confusion going around these days about even what the Buddha taught, not even negating some of his essential teachings on karma and precepts. This can come up even in ideas about Zen training. People trying to perhaps make the teaching match popular ideas intended to make us comfortable. But Buddhism goes much deeper than that, and sometimes it does make us uncomfortable. As Dogen says, we must always be disturbed by the truth. And if that's happening, that can be a very positive thing and can be an aspect of our Buddha nature pointing us to what needs to be done. So it isn't necessarily negative in that sense. I'll just quote a bit from Reverend Master Jiyu here on precepts. And she says, the first teaching that any master should give to a person is to refrain from all evil. There was a sad mistake made in this regard when my generation was beginning to study Zen, because the Oriental teachers, or now we use the term East Asian teachers, who came over, hearing that we students were Buddhists, naturally presumed that we had already heard and taken to heart this teaching. Therefore, many of them started at a more advanced level, teaching how Zen makes it possible to go beyond conventional morality and become completely and totally free. Now that is true, but it is only true once the Buddhist precepts are already part of your blood and bones. Unfortunately, since many of the students of my generation had never heard the teaching, refrain from all evil whatsoever, and this is a part of Reverend Master Jiyu's commentary on Dogen's chapter on refraining from all evil in the Shobogenzo. They had never heard this teaching of refrain from all evil whatsoever, the teaching of the freedom of Zen, caused some of us to say, oh goody, I can do what I please, and so on and so forth. So as Dogen makes clear to everyone, the very first thing that one should hear as a Buddhist is refrain from all evil. That is the greatest of all teachings. For without this foundation, nothing in the way of mature Buddhist training can be built. And when she talks about, and Dogen talks about all evil, there's a term he uses, makusa, it refers to that which is unreal or delusory, that which hides us from the unborn. The first of the three pure precepts, cease from evil, cease from that which is unreal or delusory. She goes on to say in this chapter, we should know that it is our pure intent, our constant attempt to refrain from evil, which is the greatest of all training. Refrain from that which is unreal. As I have said many times, she says, one cannot have a great understanding of the truth until one has rooted out the attachments. And this is actualized by the constant attempt to cease from evil, the will to cease from evil. In the passage above, you'll note that Dogen speaks of self-restraint, not of attempting to destroy or defeat evil. We attempt to destroy things so as to be rid of them forever, but it does not work that way. We need to be able to learn to live with them with self-restraint. This is what I mean when I say that the attachments must be rooted out. I do not mean that the attachments shall never again arise. I mean that training is constant, practice is constant, refraining from all evil is constant. It is also very important to remember the principle, in quotes, that evil does not break a person. That's a quote from Dogen. Nothing has the power to do that. Training and practice are always possible, and once refraining from evil has become our way of life, the strength from our training and practice make it possible for us to encounter all manner of situations without becoming distressed by them, judgmental of them, or corrupted by them. Thus, the saying about the iron person, which I am very much aspiring to, not there yet fully, but working on it. So the third of these essential teachings, the principle that all beings are at heart Buddha. Koho Zenji, Master Jiyu's teacher, says that this is really quintessential to Great Master Dogen's teaching, and he emphasized this in particular. But of course, it goes back to the time of the Buddha and beyond that, beyond the Buddha. And certainly to me, this is a quintessential aspect of Buddhist practice, and strongly emphasized in our tradition, as I mentioned. However greedy or angry or confused we beings may be at times, we cultivate faith in our own and each other's original Buddha nature. Thus, the need always to turn our hearts toward kindness. The Buddha taught his disciples to contemplate loving kindness towards all beings, beginning with ourselves and those we love, and then those familiar, and eventually towards those whom we really don't like. Much of our practice is designed to help us see beyond and let go of our selfish views and open up to the wisdoms of charity, tenderness, benevolence, and sympathy. These bodhisattva practices. And through these bodhisattva practices, we learn, even unknowingly sometimes, how to appeal to each other's Buddha heart, thus helping to lighten the karmic load that beings carry and support our inherent inclination toward goodness and wholesome living. And of course, one of the ways we do this is to share and transfer the merits, dedicate the merits of our practice and training for the benefit of all those in need, whatever their religion, views, nationality, their race, political inclinations, whether they are friends or enemies. And this has an amazing quality of opening our own hearts and minds, and also of benefiting others, regardless of time, space, distance. As we accept and see more deeply that all beings and things are at heart Buddha, we realize that everything also can teach us as a result. Nothing is ultimately wasted. Even the mistakes we've made in the past, even the unfortunate things that we hear constantly in the news, as long as we're doing our best now to learn from them and taking refuge in the three treasures. This is the true meaning of having an open and flexible mind. And to me, this teaching of all beings are at heart Buddha brings just the greatest comfort. Of course, it's an ongoing practice. It'll be something that I'll be aspiring to all of my life. But in the long run, it brings, to me, a great satisfaction, because in that place, there's no real separation between ourselves and all beings and things. And we don't feel as helpless and worried, I think. There is nothing at all ultimately abandoned by Buddha. Nothing excluded within the heart of great compassion. And we have to keep up the practice of meditation and the precepts in order to realize this and to deepen the realization of this truth and make it truly manifest in our daily lives, of course. Reverend Master Jiyu, one of my favorite journal articles of hers way back from 1991, where she talks about the water of the spirit, she refers to the bodhicitta, which, the inherent will to enlightenment, the inherent wish to enlightenment, the inherent wish of our Buddha nature. And she, just to summarize, she says, however defiled and obscured the bodhicitta may find itself in profane hearts, it is essentially the same as that in all the Buddhas. And she says, this is one of the most beautiful lines ever written. However defiled by dirt it may become, it is essentially the same bodhicitta. However murky we make the water, it is essentially the same water of the spirit that flows through all Buddhas. And I think we can take heart in that and honor that in our relations with beings and things. When I first came here, I was very impressed. Among many things that impressed me greatly was how Reverend Master Jiyu's teaching on how to treat inanimate things. Our brooms, our hammers, our belongings, our nails, our everything, our plates when we eat. We were taught to, and still are, taught to treat them with care and respect, that they were in fact themselves part of the Buddha nature, and were constantly helping us on the road towards enlightenment, helping us in our training. And finally, we have the essential teaching and practice of gratitude. Reverend Master, of course, taught us that this is the fifth wisdom, fifth of the bodhisattva practices. Charity, we have tenderness, benevolence, sympathy, and gratitude. practice, as well as the natural result of ceaseless practice, arising out of ceaseless spirituality, as she says, or the immaculacy of emptiness. Our daily training is indeed an expression of gratitude. This is something that Koho Zenji emphasized strongly to her. I'll quote a little bit of Dogen here in his Shushogi, which most of you have heard, where he talks about putting the teachings into practice and showing gratitude. He says, the Buddha nature should be thus simply awakened in all living things within this world, for their desire to be born herein has been fulfilled. As this is so, why should they not be grateful to Shakyamuni Buddha? I know personally I forget sometimes to be appreciative of this human birth that I have and all that it brings to me and the opportunities for realizing liberation. He says, if the truth had not spread throughout the entire world, it would have been impossible for us to have found it, even should we have been willing to give our very lives for it. We should think deeply upon this. How fortunate have we been to be born now, when it is possible to see the truth. And, of course, Koho Zenji refers to this often, about our training being an expression, our daily training being an expression of gratitude to Shakyamuni Buddha. And he also says in here, let's see, he's talking about, in his book Soto Zen, he talks about essential teachings of Soto Zen. He's talking about some of the ancient ancestors and monasteries, and he says, since they did not receive any aid from the government, the necessary work for the maintenance of the monastery, this sounds a lot like what we're doing today, the necessary work for the maintenance of the monastery had to be divided among the monks, some doing the cooking, others the farming and the sweeping, repairs, and so on. The value of this work was held to be fully equal to that of formal seated meditation. Any work which is based upon the Buddha nature is said to be radiant. All words and actions which emanate from religious training are a concrete expression of our faith and gratitude. I love that. It's very, very helpful to remember when we're going through, sometimes slogging through daily life and dealing with many challenges. The Gyoji no Maki by Dogen says, one's daily actions express one's gratitude for the great benevolence of the ancestors. Each day, too, is sacred and can never come again. Takeko Kuji wrote in a poem, do you not see that the flower which scatters on the morning, so long as it has strength, will bloom? Who can be sure of their life tomorrow? We must therefore seek the way without hesitation and help others as much as possible as long as we are alive. He goes on to say, Great Master Pai Chang, or Hyakucho in Japanese, even in his old age, continued to sweep the garden every morning, along with his young disciples. One day his disciples, unable to bear the sight of their old master doing physical work, hid the broom. Hyakujo responded by saying, if I do not work one day, I shall not eat that day, and declined all food. And Dogen says, the life of this one day today is absolutely vital life. Your body is deeply significant. So, true source of gratitude. And within that gratitude, we have the practice of bowing. As we know, you've heard many times us say, as long as bowing exists, Buddhism will exist. So this practice of turning our hearts towards gratitude, very essential in our daily training. And many of our little customs are bowing, or making gasho to each other, bowing to the altars, the way we care for the altars and so on, are all expressions of, can help us to remain in the presence of bowing and true gratitude, true liberation. And that's my talk for now.